Hello, family. Welcome to episode 312 of Stand Up Daily. Joining me today are the co-authors of a new novel called 2034, a novel of the next world war. One is an admiral, James Stavridis, and the other is a former Marine, a Marine, Elliot Ackerman. Both great writers, co-authors of this book. Join me today for a very special conversation. My name is Pete Dominic. Please stand up with me right now. Stand up. When I say please stand up with me right now, I realize that is kind of a call to arms, asking you to kind of stand up. You don't have to ever get up, actually get up. The idea of the show, the premise of the show, was always to fight apathy. Stand up for something. Stand up against something, like I did in the deli against the guy who wouldn't wear his mask the other day. Whether it's a little thing, it's a big thing, it's about doing something, it's about caring, it's about having a purpose, and I'm so glad to have you joining me. And I do want to mention one very special person in our community. She has been one of the longest, most dedicated listeners who has become a loyal friend and supporter. Many of you know if you listen to the show a long time because she's been part of our community. Her name is Tina Winsett, and I just want to briefly say that Tina is one of the most remarkable, generous, kind people I've ever known in my life. She's never had it easy, and she's always done so much for so many folks, including me. And Tina is in a tough financial situation at the moment. She takes care of a lot of people, and now she needs someone to give her a little help, a little bridge. And we've been taking some donations for Tina to help her out, and I'm happy to say that we've actually raised enough money that she can stay in her house for a few more months. She's just this amazing woman, which a lot of listeners are familiar with her. Maybe you're not, but if you've got like an extra $5 or $10 or whatever you've got, and you want to send it to Tina, she sure could use it. She's helped so many other people, and she unabashedly reached out for help herself. She's at TM Winsett on Venmo, at TM WINSETT on Venmo. So many of you already sent her money. And I know it's a little bit weird, and I know that Tina thinks that, but at the same time, I'm so impressed with her for reaching out. You know, sometimes when you help people all of your life, it's hard to ask for help yourself. I found that out myself after I lost my job in the fall of October 2019. It was really difficult for me to ask for help, but I realized there was a bunch of people that wanted to help, and so super gratifying. I don't know what word I just said. Superly? Very gratifying to be able to do that. And so if anybody wants to, by all means, Tina's just been an amazing part of our community, a kind of moral center like so many of you. So definitely, if you can, that'd be great. Okay, now moving on. Lots to discuss with you. I hope you're hanging in there. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Spring right around the corner. And I've got a lot to discuss here at the top. Lots of news going on, as always. So now it's time for what I call the last 24 hours of news. Here we go. Let me just start with the horrible news. Get it out of the way. Out of Georgia on Tuesday night, a man was captured in Georgia, but he's suspected in 3 shootings at Atlanta area massage parlors that killed 8 people. Officials said 4 people were killed in Cherokee County north of Atlanta around 5 p.m. and 4 died in 2 shootings at spas in Atlanta shortly less than an hour later. Officials have not disclosed the suspected motive, but they do have a young man who's been arrested. So pretty horrible news coming out of Georgia, and I did want to mention that here at the top. That did happen in the last 24 hours after all. Southwest border crossings apparently on pace for some of the highest levels in 20 years. But in the last 9 months of the Trump presidency, according to Julian Castro, who is in Texas, there was a 690% increase in unaccompanied minors encountered by the Customs and Border Patrol. Now, there's been a 61% increase under President Biden, but we hadn't heard much from Republicans until, well, today, where Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader and junk monster, went down the border and said this was all created by Joe Biden.
This crisis is created by the presidential policies of this new administration. There's no other way to claim it. than a Biden border crisis.
The Biden border crisis? Who workshopped that? Well done. It's the Biden border crisis. And the president himself was asked about the Biden border crisis, although I guess he didn't refer to it, because ABC News' George Stephanopoulos had the exclusive sit-down with Joe Biden. Here's an excerpt from that interview on this subject.
A lot of the migrants coming in saying they're coming in because you promised to make things better. It seems to be getting worse by the day. Was it a mistake not to anticipate this surge?
Well, first of all, there was a surge the last 2 years, in 19 and 20, there was a surge as well.
This one might be worse.
No, well, it could be, but here's the deal. We're sending back people to, first of all, the idea that Joe Biden said come, because I heard the other day that they're coming because they know I'm a nice guy and I won't do what Trump did.
They're saying this.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. They're not.
Do you have to say quite clearly, don't come?
Yes, I can say quite clearly, don't come. And what we're in the process of getting set up, don't leave your town or city or community.
Always a tough situation for any president. No easy solutions, but we do have to invest in the countries that they're coming from to create more stability and, of course, to vet people before they come so we can make sure that those who are in real danger of being persecuted, of being killed, of being trafficked can find safe harbor, safe refuge in the United States of America. I'm not sure how good of an answer that was. I'm not sure how big of an issue this will be, but you bet that Republicans and right-wing media are going to focus on the invasion of people coming from south of our border. Here is Congresswoman Annette Barragan, who joined Chris Hayes on MSNBC last night talking about this.
Well, Chris, first, thanks for having me on. And you're right. Every time that there are challenges at the border, Republicans go down there, not to see what's going on, not to find solutions, but really to just try to stoke this fear and division and try to paint migrants who look different than them as from different countries as bad people. And so this is just another one of their playbooks that they're doing, and they did this weekend. What we're seeing happening is a product of the Trump administration dismantling an immigration system and dismantling the investment in Northern Triangle countries to try to address the root problems. We have to remember that there are children who are in these countries who are desperate. Maybe they've gone through hurricanes like the two that were in Honduras. They're fleeing violence, they're fleeing poverty. And of course, COVID just complicates that, are desperately making this journey to the United States because we have had a system of laws that the prior administration basically just threw out the window. And so just today, I got an update from FEMA within the hour about their efforts to help HHS, the Health and Human Services. The goal here is to make sure that these children get out of CBP custody as quickly as possible and into the home of a sponsor. Chris, I don't know if you know this, but about 80% of the cases, these children have family members here in the United States. So the administration is making every effort to reunite these children with their families while they await for their cases to be heard.
So on today, Wednesday of this week, if you're listening, whenever you're listening, the Senate, the United States Senate, in the Senate Budget Committee headed by Senator Bernie Sanders is going to be having a hearing on equality. And Senator Bernie Sanders invited Amazon's Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, to come and testify, but apparently he turned him down. Bezos, for his statement, said, "We fully endorse Senator Sanders' efforts to reduce income inequality with legislation to increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour for all workers, like we did for hours in 2018. And here is Bernie Sanders talking about all of this again on MSNBC with Chris Hayes last night. Chris asked Senator Bernie Sanders what he wanted to ask Jeff Bezos if he had shown up.
Well, not a radically different question than I wanted to ask the Walton family last week when we did a hearing on minimum wage. Walton family is the wealthiest family in America, and yet they pay their workers starvation wages. And what I wanted to say to Jeff Bezos, who, by the way, with a little bit of prodding from some of us, raised his minimum wage to $15 an hour. What I wanted to say is, Jeff, you are worth $180 billion. $180 billion. You are the wealthiest person on earth. Why are you spending millions of dollars trying to defeat a union organizing effort in Alabama where your workers are fighting for decent wages and decent working conditions. What is your problem? When is enough enough? So tomorrow we're going to deal not just with Bezos and the union organizing drive in Alabama, but what we're going to deal with is the whole issue of income and wealth inequality and the fact that in many ways, Chris, this country is moving toward an oligarchy where two people today, Bezos and Elon Musk, two people own more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people, where CEOs today are making over 300 times what their average worker is making. We need to take a hard look at that and determine the kind of country we want to become. And I do not believe we want to become an oligarchy. I think we want an economy that works for all, not just the people on top.
All right, we've heard much of that before, but when he puts it in the context with the two richest people, ooh, that is infuriating. Okay, also, Chris Hayes asked Bernie Sanders just to give him his take on the COVID rescue bill and what it meant for the 99%, if you will. And he also talked about why it's important to carry out this policy and what it means for the reputation of government doing things for people.
No, that's exactly right. And we have to continue to do that. To me, Chris, what was so important about this legislation is not only the $1,400, not only beginning effectively to deal with the pandemic, not only cutting childhood poverty in half, not only getting money to states and cities who desperately need it, not only extending unemployment, not only developing great summer programs for our kids, community health centers all over this country will be expanded. It is that and much more. It is finally seeing the United States Congress taking a hard look at the problems facing working families and responding rather than listening to corporate lobbyists, rather than listening to wealthy campaign contributors. They are actually paying attention to the needs of the American people. And that is what the Democratic Party has got to continue to do. And if we do that, we'll transform this country and will become a political force that will not lose control of the House of the Senate.
You know, he's right. You know, Bernie is right. If government can actually get things done, I think it's going to make a huge difference. And they already are off to a great start. I think Joe Biden, I read the other day, someone that I trust and respect said that Joe Biden is off to a better start than any president since FDR. Does that make any sense? Does that resonate? Do you agree with that, given the passing of this historic legislation, rescue bill, that is going to change and fight child poverty in a way nothing else has for a generation? So pretty cool, I think, and excited to see what happens with it. I hope Bernie's right. All right, moving on here on the last 24. This happened. I saw a tweet from my friend Jared Yates Sexton at JY Sexton, who wrote, "It's just wild that 2 months ago there was an attempted coup, and every single day since, more and more disturbing details are being discovered, and Republicans are allowed to defend and sanitize it, and Americans are just kind of moving on." Well, guess what? Congressman Jason Crow is not. That's right. He was on MSNBC yesterday talking about a bill that he wants to pass through the House called the Capital Remembrance Act that would make sure that we don't forget the significance of those that we lost and the reality of what happened on January 6th. Here he is talking about it on MSNBC on Tuesday morning.
Yeah, well, I've been shocked by a lot of things that have happened in the era of Donald Trump over the last 4 years before Joe Biden became president. But perhaps nothing more shocking than seeing an insurrection where a police officer was murdered, 140 others brutally beaten, assassination attempt on members of Congress, and an attempt to derail the democracy. And within hours later, members of the GOP just doing what Donald Trump wanted them to do and continuing to perpetrate the big lie. And of course, in the weeks since that attack, in the last 2 months or so, people have continued to try to discount the attack, saying it really wasn't an insurrection. It wasn't a really big deal. That's just not going to happen on my watch. That's the bottom line. Me and my colleague Susan Wild, who you saw there in that picture, are going to make sure that we never forget this because, that's the interesting thing about history. If you don't remember the things we've been through, they do have that tendency, as the saying goes, to repeat themselves and to happen again. So it's extremely important to remember what happened so we can actually fix it going forward and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And that's why one of the reasons why we proposed this bill.
I'm behind that bill. You got it, Congressman Crow. I like that guy. All right, I saw this clip in several different places, so I decided, what the hell, I'll pull it. This is a guy named Rick Joyner, calls himself a Christian pastor, and he's urging American Christians to prepare for a civil war from Fort Mill, South Carolina, and he was introduced by evangelical televangelist Jim Baker on his Monday show as a, quote, Christian prophet. Here he is.
It will be a civil war. And, it's going to be, I think, increasingly worse with the increasing time it takes for Americans to stand up and push back against this evil that has been taking over our land. There's a time for peace and a time for war. It says in Ecclesiastes, well, we're not headed towards peace right now. We're headed towards conflict and war, and we need to prepare for it. We need to put out the word. People need to be prepared.
All right. Thank you for the warning, you fucking lunatic. Pastor Rick Joyner. I always love hearing from guys like him warning us. I always love hearing from Christians like him quoting the Bible and promoting war. Fantastic. All right. Well, here's something to cleanse your palate. This went absolutely viral. In fact, so viral that you might have already seen it. This is testimony from the father of a trans girl in Missouri at the Missouri House of Representatives, where they're thinking of passing some pretty awful legislation. And here is the father. His name is Brandon Bulware, and I'll let him take it away. This is about 3 minutes. It's pretty amazing and powerful, and I just wanted to share it here at the end of the last 24.
My name is Brandon Bulware. And, Chairman, I'll go as quickly as I can. I'm a lifelong Missourian. I'm a business lawyer. I'm a Christian. I'm the son of a Methodist minister. I'm a husband. I'm the father of 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, including a wonderful and beautiful transgender daughter, who today happens to be her birthday. And I chose to be here. She doesn't know that. She thinks I'm at work. One thing I often hear when transgender issues are discussed is, I don't get it. I don't understand. And I would expect some of you to have said that and feel the same way. I didn't get it either. For years, I didn't get it. For years, I would not let my daughter wear girl clothes. I did not let her play with girl toys. I forced my daughter to wear boy clothes and get short haircuts, play on boy sports teams. Why did I do this? To protect my child. I did not want my daughter or her siblings to get teased. And truth be told, I did it to protect myself as well. I wanted to avoid those inevitable questions as to why my child did not look and act like a boy. My child was miserable. I cannot overstate that. She was absolutely miserable, especially at school. No confidence, no friends, no laughter. I honestly say this, I had a child who did not smile. We did that for years. We did that against the advice of teachers, therapists, and other experts. I remember the day everything changed for me. I'd gotten home from work, and my daughter and her brother were in the front lawn. And my daughter had sneaked on one of her older sister's play dresses. And they wanted to go across the street and play with the neighbor's kids. It was time for dinner. I said, come in. She asked, can she go across the street? I said, no. She asked me if she went inside and put on boy clothes, could she then go across the street and play? And it's then that it hit me that my daughter was equating being good with being someone else. I was teaching her to deny who she is. As a parent, the one thing we cannot do, the one thing, is silence our child's spirit. And so on that day, my wife and I stopped silencing our child's spirit. The moment we allowed my daughter to be who she is, to grow her hair, to wear the clothes she wanted to wear, she was a different child. And I mean, it was immediate. It was a total transformation. I now have a confident, a smiling, a happy daughter. She plays on a girls' volleyball team. She has friendships. She's a kid. I came here today as a parent to share my story. I need you to understand that this language, if it becomes law, will have real effects on real people. It will affect my daughter. It will mean she cannot play on the girls' volleyball team or dance squad or tennis team. I ask you, please don't take that away from my daughter or the countless others like her who are out there. Let them have their childhoods. Let them be who they are. I ask you to vote against this legislation.
Pretty powerful, huh? Pretty powerful testimony from Brandon Boulware in Missouri, and I thought that would be a great way to end the last 24 as I move into the second news segment that I do every day. It's called The News Dump, folks, and people send in jingles, and here's another one from the great Pete Coe.
Farmer's cow is pregnant and is looking rather plump. Maybe she'll give birth during today's news dump.
What in the goddamn hell was that, Pete? Keep them coming. I live for your weird news dump jingles that always incorporate animals and animal sounds. Send them my way. Stand up with Pete at gmail.com. All right, it's not COVID, it's not politics, but it is important, or at least interesting. It's the News Dump, brought to you by Noble Pies, noblepies.com. Go get your pie at Noble Pies. They didn't pay for sponsorship. I just wanted to plug Noble Pies. noblepies.com. They're the best. Okay, let's get to it. And we start in California here, where a large amount of fireworks at a house sparked an explosion and fire that left 2 people dead in Ontario, California, according to the city and the fire department. Oh my God, that is horrible. Why do you own any fireworks, and why were they stored? How did this happen? Absolutely horrific story coming out of California. Let's move on to Virginia, where Virginia has become the 4th state to ban cosmetic animal testing. Illinois, California, and Nevada have also banned cosmetic animal testing. Governor Ralph Northam, Mr. Blackface himself, signed the Humane Cosmetics Act, which prohibits cosmetics manufacturers from conducting or contracting for cosmetic animal testing in the Commonwealth areas in or after January 1st. The law will also ban the sale of cosmetics that have been tested on animals for profit. See, you wouldn't have had that if you would have ran him out on the rail because of his shitty, awful Halloween costumes, arguably. All right, let's talk about a major lawsuit. The Sackler family has boosted its contribution to the settlement of opioids lawsuits to $4.2 billion under a restructuring plan filed overnight by Purdue Pharma with the federal bankruptcy court in White Plains, New York. Purdue said the plan amounts to $10 billion of value for claimants and the communities affected by the opioid crisis that was fueled by the company's aggressive marketing of OxyContin, according to multiple lawsuits. It's not nearly enough money, and that family should all go to jail because they're all murderers. Moving on. February retail sales fell 3% after soaring in January. Americans spent less last month, partly due to bad weather in parts of the country that kept shoppers away from stores, but retail sales fell a seasonally adjusted 3% in February from the month before, according to the U.S. Commerce Department on Tuesday. Retail sales are expected to rise again in March as many Americans are getting $1,400 direct payments, and I hope that you'll consider buying a subscription to Stand Up with Pete Dominic while you're at it. That's retail, isn't it? New York City has moved to dismiss hundreds of prostitution cases and decriminalize sex work. How about that? The Queens District Attorney announced the move on Tuesday. The move came the same day New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio pushed to decriminalize sex work. I like that movement. Very important, interesting, and I'll definitely be following up and talking with folks about it. And how about this headline? Catholic Order, the Jesuits, have pledged $100 million to benefit descendants of enslaved people that it sold. The foundation created with descendants aims to atone for this historic sin. That's right, the Jesuit Conference of U.S. and Canada and Order of the Catholic Church announced the goal of raising $100 million to benefit the descendants of enslaved people historically owned and sold by the Jesuits. The money will go toward a new formally formed foundation, the Descendants Truth and Reconciliation Foundation, that was created by the church in partnership with a Descendants Association group of descendants that were enslaved and sold by Jesuits in 1838. And that is good news. I hope they succeed. And that is the end of today's news dump. And now it's time to get to my first guest. Joining me today, they are the co-authors of a new book titled 2034, A Novel of the Next World War. 2034 asks the reader evocative questions about how America will fight in the future. What happens in the book is not beyond the realm of possibility. Pearl Harbor, 9/11, and even COVID, one could say, were failures of imagination, a failure to imagine what could happen and therefore be unprepared for it. It is written by two guys, both of which I've interviewed before. One is Admiral James Stavridis. He is a retired Navy admiral who spent more than 30 years in the U.S. Navy, rising to the rank of a 4-star admiral. He was the supreme Allied commander at NATO and previously commanded U.S. Southern Command, overseeing military operations in Latin America. At sea, he actually commanded a Navy destroyer, a destroyer squadron, and an entire aircraft carrier battle group. He also has a PhD from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, where he also served for 5 years as dean, and he also first met his co-author, who's an old friend of mine I've interviewed several times. He's an award-winning novelist. He wrote, most recently, Red Dress in Black and White. His books have been nominated for the National Book Award, the Andrew Carnegie Medal in both fiction and nonfiction, and the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, among others. His writing often appears in Esquire, The New Yorker, and the New York Times. He's both a former White House fellow and Marine Special Forces member. He served 5 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, where he received the Silver Star, the Bronze Star for Valor, and the Purple Heart. Elliot Ackerman and Admiral James Stavridis join me to talk about the new novel that they wrote together, 2034, A Novel of the Next World War. I'm really happy with this interview, the way that it came out. We had some actual pretty good laughs and moments, and it was super interesting, enlightening, and not actually that scary. There is some hope and some light, and they shed that as well. Elliot Ackerman, Admiral James Stavridis, let's do it. So it's great to have both of these guys joining me via Zoom. I'm psyched to reconnect with Elliot Ackerman, who I've known for a long time, and it's great to have Admiral James Stavridis back on. I say back on, but here for the first time on the podcast, in the shed. Gentlemen, congratulations on this book. Thank you very much for joining me.
It's our pleasure. I'm very happy to be in the shed with you today.
Well,
my first time in the shed.
Is it your first time? This could get really sideways very quickly, gentlemen, but I'm not doing it. So, Elliot, I thought it might be interesting to talk here at the top for you guys to talk about each other, because I've been watching all the interviews, I've been reading your book, and we're going to talk all about it. But I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about how the two of you came together. You both are great writers. You've both written a bunch of books. The Admiral, mostly nonfiction. Yours have been novels that have been won awards, of course. How and frankly, why would you work with him, Elliot?
You should ask him. I think you should ask him.
It's better for him to. Okay, all right.
Yeah. Why would you work with Elliot? I would just start with how we got to know one another. We're both graduates of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts, so that's where we first met. The Admiral was the dean, and he invited me to come be the writer in residence for a semester. And in my list of responsibilities, one of the bullet points was, talk with the dean about books when he feels like it. So this led to lots of kind of, hanging out in his office, just talking about the variety of books he was reading. And I think, our friendship really built around that, and, an appreciation for his sensibility in books. So when this project came up, it wasn't like it was totally coming out of left field. And we share an editor at Penguin Press.
So, Admiral, what about you? Why did you want to work with Elliot Ackerman? And did you know, had you read his work? I know you guys are familiar with each other from Tufts.
Yeah, you can flip over his first novel, Green on Blue, and you'll find a blurb from me on the background that compares him to Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, wow.
And I meant that. He's that good, and that would be the simple reason I would want to work with him. In addition, as Elliot points out correctly, to our friendship, and we have so much in common. We're both about 6 feet tall, both very good looking. We both have executive hair. Oops, wait a minute. Only one of us is like that, and it's not the Admiral.
Don't be modest on this show, sir. You may not be a tall man, but you certainly are a large man in many, many ways. So I think the best, this is a fiction. 2034. But it is also, gentlemen, clearly you did this for some larger reason, which is you could argue an argument, a public service, or a cautionary tale. Elliot, is that what this is?
So really, it's all three. This book kind of fits into a genre that used to be very familiar, which was this type of speculative, almost Cold War fiction. Books like The Third World War by John Hackett, or even films that I grew up with, like Red Dawn, where we were kind of deeply imagining what these wars would look like. And in imagining them so richly, we managed to avoid them. And so the question became, what was sort of the next looming conflict, and how could we imagine? And clearly it was, something with China.
So let's talk about the players, Admiral. Who are and we can talk about the characters and the character development, which are all fascinating. You guys really clearly had a lot of fun creating the characters and creating the narrative, but it's based on real world geopolitics. You picked 2034 for a reason. Who are the countries that we are talking about mainly that are characters in the book?
Yeah, the two protagonists, if you will, are China and the United States. And I want to make a point. This is not Tom Clancy. There's not high tech at the center of this thing. This is about people facing disastrous situations. United States and China, not really good guys, bad guys. The villain in the piece is war. So in 2034, 10 to 15 years from now, I think the competition between the two superpowers is going to be exacerbated. And the side players will be Iran and Russia, who almost certainly will be aligned with China, and India, which will have a more, shall we say, ambiguous situation in global geopolitics. So those five are the principal national characters. Elliot might want to say a word about some of the people, because I think this is, in the end of the day, is a character-driven novel.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting, as all of Elliot's work is. Go ahead, Elliot. Who's in this?
No, I would just add, because listen, ultimately, there can be technology, and that factors into this in the geopolitics. But, wars are fought by people. War is a contest of human will. So if you're going to tell a war story, you got to tell a story about people. And so some of the characters in this book are, for instance, it opens and you meet Commodore Sarah Hunt, who's on a freedom of navigation patrol in the South China Sea. You quickly meet Chris Wedge Mitchell. His call sign's Wedge because a wedge is the world's simplest tool, and he's a fourth-generation fighter pilot. There is a principal character who's a veteran of the Iranian Quds Force, one who is a Chinese admiral, and an Indian American who works on the national security staff. So it's really a book that it's lean, it's intimate. You follow these five principal characters kind of into the world of 2034, and you see the conflict from their eyes.
And you also have a female president in the book as well. And Admiral, if you wouldn't mind, both of you actually, if you wouldn't mind just telling me about a woman who you have served with. Recently, there's been some controversy about women serving in the military, an issue that I've talked a lot about. And Jim, if you wouldn't mind telling me about a woman who you served with.
The obvious one for me, near contemporary woman named Michelle Howard. She's African-American. She's like 5 feet tall. She's hardly a big, imposing presence out of central casting for admirals. She's scrapped every step of her career. She's commanded in arguably the hardest place in the Navy to succeed, which is our amphibious forces. She was the one-star admiral who was the on-scene commander for the rescue of Captain Phillips. She's the one who gave the order for the snipers to take out these Somali pirates. She's somebody I would want right next to me on the bridge wing. And I'll close, by the way, by saying I commanded one of the very first destroyers in the U.S. Navy to have a mixed gender crew. And I commanded that ship, USS Barry, for a year with an all-male crew. And then I ended up for 18 months, same ship. Now it's a mixed gender ship. So I've seen it both ways. Women are nothing but additive to the military of the United States.
I love it when people say that women are too emotional to lead or to serve or something. I'm like, have you ever been around a bunch of dudes? Ever? Anywhere? Ever? Elliot, you are as I guess you're supposed to say, a Marine, but you were Special Forces. Should women be in combat and serving in Special Forces elite units like the one you served in? And could you tell me about any?
I would actually tell you, I began my career in the infantry when the infantry was all male. So for the first half dozen years of my career, I never served around a female. It was actually only when I got into special operations and working with our intelligence units that I began working with females. And I would tell you, one of the best operators I ever worked with, who still works in intelligence. I'll only give you her first name, which was Jessica. And, she was as good and as fit as any man, to the point where her nickname around the unit was Slay J.
That's awesome. I love it. All right. So you said that it's more about people than it is about the technologies, I think. Is that how you said it, Elliot?
Yeah, I don't say that it's more, but I think that any type of book that writes about war, it doesn't write about people, is an incomplete book. So characters take center stage in this.
And as they do in real life, decisions that humans are making are everything. But if you want to know about why we need to invest in cyber technology and warfare, all you have to do to Jim Stavridis is say, hey, Jim.
We are looking at grave danger ahead in the world of cyber. And don't trust me. Look at the newspapers for the last month. Huge SolarWinds hack takes down 400 of the Fortune 500 companies, takes down 12 of the U.S. cabinet agencies. That's followed by a Chinese hack of Microsoft Exchange. We still don't know the extent of that. Want another example? In South Florida, I'm a native Floridian, little town down there.
I'm sorry to hear that, sir.
Yeah, someone has to be Admiral Florida, man. And down in my native state, we had a water treatment plant hacked using cyber that potentially could have poisoned thousands of people by injecting chemicals into the water supply. This is real. It's getting worse. And we are inadequately prepared. And by the way, one of the big events at the beginning of the novel of 2034 is, in fact, a cyber attack.
So, and there's also combat at sea. And I wanted to ask you, I always think about, I know nothing, but of course I try to act like I do. But I think about the budget, the defense budget, or the threat matrix. And with all due respect, sir, I mean, I know you commanded a carrier group, but it seems like a terrible investment to invest in billion-dollar warships when nanobots and cyber warfare and space and are really the more threats. So I wanted to just ask you about your service. I mean, I feel like I can't think of any kind of serious combat at sea in the last several years. Did you yourself ever get into conflict while you were a commander at sea?
Not ship on ship. Recall that for the last 20 years, while I was in command positions, our military was focused on creating combat effect ashore. So my combat experience has more to do with launching cruise missiles, putting SEALs ashore, conducting arms embargoes, all those kinds of things. Big fleet-on-fleet combat, the last time that happened was the Falkland Islands, when the British sent a huge task force down in the 1980s and reopened, if you will, the Falkland Islands. Could we have ship-on-ship warfare against China or Russia? You bet. And we would be very foolish to simply kind of wish that away. Having said that, Pete, I'm with you that we ought to be putting more emphasis on cyber, nanotechnology, space, our defense and offensive use of hypersonic cruise missiles. And the way to think about this, frankly, is not like an on and off switch. In other words, we're not going to wake up on Tuesday and all those conventional forces are useless. That's not how it works. It's a rheostat. Right now, they're still pretty useful. Over time, they'll be less useful. That's why we need to dial up the tech side of this, which you correctly point out.
You go in many of the interviews that you guys have already done for the book, and I've watched many of them. You've been asked a lot about the kind of the political divisiveness in America, and a lot of these folks I've watched at least asked, they were right leaning or asked from the right, these leaning questions about like cancel culture and and woke culture and all that. And I always feel like that's a red herring to some extent. But there is no doubt that political partisanship and divisiveness is what is making us weaker. Elliot, what do you make of having served in Afghanistan and Iraq and seen what sectarian division can do to a nation? What do you make of how do you see what's happened to America? And frankly, I think it matters that other countries realize this, which is why they have done all they can to get involved in dividing us with actual fake news, etc.
I mean, listen, Pete, I think you basically hit it on the head. I mean, if you want to debilitate the United States, you should have a multi-pronged strategy. And I think one way to do that is to root for division within this nation so that we also, as we're facing external actors, are rotting from within. And I think the type of hyper-partisan, divisive politics, our inability to unite seemingly around almost anything, you would have hoped this pandemic would have been something that brought Americans together. Instead, it's divided us. And that's been very dispiriting to see, is something that our adversaries correctly view as a weakness and a point of vulnerability that they are actively exploiting. So American division is, as much as cyber and all the weapons we're talking about are liabilities, so is American division as we look out into future decades.
Can I just add a point?
I'm sorry, we're out of time. We have to go to commercial, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Pete. I really appreciate it. It's been great being on your show. So let's also remember our great advantages, what this country has going for it. We have immense continental geography, natural resources too abundant to count, arable land, fresh water, strategic minerals, a youthful population, which China does not have. Immigrants want to come here. Newsflash, that's a good thing. Got to control our borders, got to do it with process. But we have so much going for us. But Elliot is right. The biggest thing that could hold us back and weaken us as we make the turn into this 21st century is this polarization in the country.
I also feel like to a huge extent, obviously the Chinese, probably the rest of the world, but especially the Chinese, and I want to argue the Arab world. I'm thinking of Afghanistan. What is the phrase? The clocks and the watches phrase. The bottom line.
Yeah.
You've got the watches, we've got the time.
Yeah, the Chinese are planning, I think I heard one of you say, like for 200 years in advance. They're certainly planning for a decade in advance with the Belt and Road and their investments. Yep. And obviously their strategies, their national security strategies, their energy, all of that. Afghanistan, the same. I mean, there's a lot of that future generations. I mean, Native Americans, frankly, thought about this. But Americans in general, our society is about quarterly capitalism, meaning let's make a deal so we can get better outcomes in the next freaking, financial quarter and elections that are happening in 2 years, policies that are going to come up and affect us now or obviously in 4 years. How close am I to talking about the American sense of urgency? We make plans like an hour ahead, and the Chinese are making plans, and the Arab world is making plans for generations ahead. Jim?
The Chinese are culturally predisposed to long-range thinking. They're the oldest civilization state in human history. Think about the theory of building the Great Wall of China, the investment to do that, the length of time involved to do it. They're predisposed in that direction. Look, in the Pentagon, we do high fives when we put together a 1-year budget and a 4-year plan. China has a 50-year plan, a 100-year plan, a 200-year plan, and they are marching relentlessly down it. And we had better up our game in this regard, or we are going to fall way behind in this competition. Last thought, I'll give you a couple of problems that you cannot solve with short-term thinking. You can't solve the problems of climate change. You can't solve the next pandemic. You can't solve cybersecurity. You've got to think out the timeline. And that is what we in our small way have tried to inculcate with the book 2034.
So when you're writing this book, Elliot, you have to think about the desires that people want for their nations, for their future. And with that, you have to take into consideration, obviously, as the Admiral just said, climate change, but really just local and local economics and where countries are at and what their interests are. And so what their incentives are to act on anything. What are some of the incentives? What are some of the goals for the countries and the characters in over the next 15 years up to 2034?
Well, I think they're complex.
I mean, pick anything you want.
Without going into depth on every single character, I would say the book is written where each character really gets their say. So, for instance, a character like Qasim Farshad, who's the godson of Qasim Soleimani, a man, and Farshad is a man who's dedicated his entire life to, thwarting the objectives of the United States on the world stage. And, on a personal level, he's someone I probably fought against. He's rendered in a sympathetic way. We very much wanted to stand in his shoes, give him his due, and let him kind of make his case on the stage that is 2034 to the reader. And we've done it with, Admiral Bao, the Chinese admiral, so that if you read this book, you'll walk away understanding their perspectives. And, if you do that, you might have been able to more kind of fully imagine this world and fully imagine the motivations of the people who could be our antagonists.
Yeah,
it's important.
I've always hated that when books or movies are from one point of view, or they're like some kind of patriotic porn. It's just stupid. It's lazy. It's lame. Like, people in other nations and societies don't love their country, their family. Admiral, how important was that in this book to show the interests of foreign nations?
It was vital, because if we are going to avoid 2034, we got to kind of reverse engineer it, come back to the present and figure out what we got to do. Job one, in my view, would be we got to listen better. We got to understand why China thinks that they own the entire South China Sea. Doesn't mean we're going to agree with it, but we better understand it if we're going to negotiate with them. We got to understand why Vladimir Putin believes Russia owns Crimea. We violently object to that. It's a violation of international law. They invaded, they took it by force. But they have in their view, an extremely compelling narrative that is steeped in 700 years of history. Doesn't mean we're going to agree with it. We better understand it. And so I'll close by saying China understands us a lot better than we understand China. We better get going.
What are their ambitions? A country's ambition, we can talk about America, or Russia, or I suppose Germany in a certain time of imperialism, of expansion is even less, pernicious. Elliot, what do you see in the interests of China or of India, and how do you work them into the book?
I think with regards to China, I mean, they've articulated their interest, the One Belt, One Road strategy that sees, an expansionist China. I think that, with regards to India as well, you've got a very young population there, a nation on the rise. The book is really a book that also, through these characters, looks at broader trends. Specifically, if we look at the last 100 years, I think we will qualify those as an American century, but that was a century forged in two fires, right? The First and the Second World War. Those are two wars that we did not begin, but we certainly finished. And we're the beneficiaries of finishing those wars. And so one of the central questions of the book is, in a war started by the United States and China, who ends that war? Who's the beneficiary of it? And without giving anything away, it's not the United States and China. So you have to read the book and find out.
You do have to read the book. It's an excellent book. It's a novel, 2034. When the publicist reached out to me, and I hadn't talked to Elliot in a while, so I didn't know what you're up to, and said that you two guys, who I know separately, had come together to work on a book. I didn't read the title. I just wrote, yes, when. So congratulations on writing this. Just a couple more quick questions just about, where we're at as a country. I hate the double standard and the false equivalencies. But I also hate when people, including me, water things down to being binary. Things are so much more complex than that. But my biggest concern is that the right in America is so wrapped up in conspiracy theories and things that didn't happen that they're not focused on the actual things that are happening, like climate change that you mentioned, or like the pandemic and the vaccine. How do we get people to be on the same page about a shared reality? We can argue about the way forward with any of these things, but the right has been captured by conspiracy theory. Joe Biden is, by all accounts, a pretty good leader, got a lot of experience, and knows a lot of Republicans. But can America have another great leader, Admiral? And I mean, and I know that you were, being considered for, I think, Hillary Clinton's running mate. You know a lot about leadership. You are a leader. You both are. But how do you lead people that aren't living in reality and that are terrified and have sympathy for this by conspiracy, by things that aren't happening? How do you do that?
Well, let me begin by simply saying I'm a centrist. I'm a registered independent, always have been, never been a Republican, never been a Democrat. It's correct. I was vetted for vice president by Hillary Clinton. I was one of 6 people actually vetted by the campaign. I was also offered a cabinet post by the Trump administration. I chose not to take it. So I'm a centrist. And I'm talking to you whether you watch MSNBC relentlessly or you live on Fox News. As Americans, we've got to start coming together. But what's the practical way to do that? Let me give you 3 ideas. One really speaks to what you raised in the conspiracy world. I'd say one thing we ought to be doing is celebrating broadly the idea of service, not just to the military, thank you for your service, but to our police, our firefighters, our diplomats, our Peace Corps volunteers, doctors and nurses on the front line of COVID, teachers in packed classrooms, teaching under these conditions for $37,000 a year in Western New York. You think she's serving the country? I do. So point 1, let's celebrate service. Let's encourage service because it's bipartisan. It's nonpartisan. Number 2, look for candidates. Again, whether you're an R or a D, look for candidates who are willing to reach across the aisles. And they exist. Look at someone like the governor of Massachusetts, the most liberal state in the country, who's a Republican, Charlie Baker. Or look at a congressman who represented me, Democrat Seth Moulton, constantly reaching over to the Republicans on the other side of the aisle. Look at Joe Manchin in West Virginia. This guy wins elections by 25 points as a Democrat in West Virginia, which President Trump carried by 30 points. These candidates exist. We ought to look for them. And to your excellent question, really the answer is not snapping your fingers. The answer is education. We give these, I'm holding up an iPhone. We put those in the hands of children when they're 11 years old. We give them no education. We don't tell them how to discern what's real, what's false, what's rumor, what's deliberate misinformation. And there are techniques and real ways to do that. That education needs to start in elementary school and continue on throughout young adulthood, at least. So there's 3 practical ideas. None of them are a silver bullet. That's what I can offer this morning.
Elliot, leadership. How do you bring people together if one group of people doesn't believe that, the world is round?
When I was in the military, leading, smaller units, few dozen guys, maybe a few hundred at the maximum. What always struck me too, also with the leaders I admired, was they always seemed to actually be not that busy. They were busy. You knew they were busy, but they had a relaxed quality about them because you could see what they were doing was they were eliciting the best out of the people who worked for them. They understood, like, their whole job was to elicit maximum effort, the best that these people had. And because they were so effective at doing that, their subordinates were always taking care of everything for them. So I look at where we're at right now in this country, and I think it's increasingly rare that our leaders are appealing to our better angels. It seems that they're always appealing to our anger, to our rage, to keeping us, staring at the news screen as one breaking story after another, makes us feel enraged. Or, I go on Twitter. When I finish 20 minutes on Twitter, I feel like I just smoked a pack of cigarettes. I mean, it has the same physiological effect on me. But unfortunately, we're in a model right now where, people want to keep your eyeballs on the screen. How do you keep people's eyeballs on the screen? By keeping them enraged. And so we have too many leaders who don't appeal to our better angels, who appear to our more base angels. And I would just say, anyone listening, be very skeptical of someone who's trying to get you angry about something, because they're probably not appealing to the best side and not offering that type of leadership.
Can I just add a quote And I'm going to quote Napoleon because I'm 5 feet 5 inches tall and short people have to stick together at all times. This is
you
serious.
don't have to stick together with Napoleon, sir. Not now, not anytime. But go ahead. Have some solidarity with Napoleon with your quote.
Napoleon, one of the great leaders, said, "A leader is a dealer in hope. A leader is a dealer in hope." And I find that the leaders today reach for the tool not only of anger, Elliot, but also of fear. They try and scare people.
Yeah.
The leaders we want are the leaders, as Napoleon said, who are dealers in hope.
That's why I liked Barack Obama so much, that actual quote. You know, it may not have worked all the time, certainly not with everybody, but I felt like he was a dealer in hope just by his own presence, much less his words, his books. All right, last question, gentlemen, is the thing that keeps a lot of people up at night in your world and my world as well, just thinking about it. And it certainly plays a role in 2034, your excellent new book, which everybody has to go buy right now. I think this is going to be big for you guys. I think this is going to put both of you on the map finally after such a long struggle with writing. No, I really do. I think it's a great read, and I think it's I think you guys are going to make it. Now that you've finally been on this podcast, I'm really excited for you. Martha Raditz has just reached out to me and says, "When do I get them?" Oh wait, my fake producer has told me you've already sat down with Martha Raditz. Okay, loud and clear. Nuclear weapons, gentlemen. Let's stop joking around here. We don't talk about it nearly enough, but one of the most indelible guests, interviews, books I've ever talked to was Eric Schlosser, who wrote a book about all the accidents and near misses with nuclear weapons. And as I said, it plays a role, obviously, in your new novel. What do we do? What can we possibly do about these weapons that more nation states are still trying to acquire, not making agreements to get rid of? Admiral, you first.
Number one.
I mean, you commanded ships with these weapons on them, did you not? Or can you not tell?
Yes, and don't forget, NATO has its own nuclear force as well. So I've had a football follow me around.
Wow.
Number one, intelligence. We've got to find out where these programs are. It's not just Iran, but we need to know exactly where North Korea is. We need to know in advance if other nations are going to make the jump and decide to go forward. Number two, a good way to prevent nations from building nuclear programs is to give them strong conventional security guarantees. That's why Japan, the third largest economy in the world, ding, 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 think they can afford nuclear weapons, think they can have the technology to build nuclear weapons. I assure you they do. They don't because they're in a conventional alliance with the United States. Similarly, in Europe, the nations of NATO in Europe look at the British and the French nuclear umbrella, and that becomes part of their set of security guarantees. So intelligence, conventional, collective security guarantees. And number three, we have simply got to talk more, think more, hence 2034, about how terrible it would be. And once you start throwing nuclear weapons around, the chances of stopping, my view, are very low.
I love how you talk in these lists. I really do. I wonder how often you frustrated Elliot when you said we should have some of the characters make more lists for arguments in the book. And Elliot's like, listen, we need to develop it. We don't need lists. It's not. Elliot, same question to you, or you could pick another threat that maybe you think doesn't get covered up. But, I'm thinking about nuclear war, but is there anything else that keeps you up at night, which is such a stupid phrase?
I would say nuclear war definitely keeps me up at night because we already talked about it. I would say, one of the themes in the book is how an over-reliance on technology can actually become a real liability in a conflict. And that's something we don't think about enough. Pete, you had me on the show for my memoir, Places and Names. Yeah. And in that book, if you remember, there's a scene where I go and meet a former member of Al Qaeda in Iraq named Abu Hussar, and we talk about our wars. And he quoted
smoked
Einstein
a Turkish pipe, I think.
That's right. And he's quoting Einstein to me, and he says, Albert Einstein predicted all of this. He said the Third World War would be a nuclear war, but the Fourth World War would be fought with sticks and stones. And that's how we beat you in Iraq, is with sticks and stones. Yep. And so as you'll see in 2034, the first aircraft that we feature in the book is a state-of-the-art F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. But without giving too much away, I'll tell you the last aircraft you see an American flying in the book is a first-generation old F-18 Hornet.
Why don't you go? Why don't you? Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
We're at the end, but I got a question for you. If guests are allowed to ask questions, I'm going to ask one anyway. What is in that pouch on your left shoulder There's some kind of like black pouch.
Yeah.
What do you keep in there?
Sure.
I'm a little worried about it.
So a great question. And yeah, you are allowed to ask questions. And Admiral, you have a lot to learn from me, I'm sure. So I'm sure you have many questions. But if you want to know what's in any of my pockets, the answer is generally weed.
Good to know.
Yeah, come by the shed anytime you want, sir. We'll talk more about the book. And
how's the ventilation in the shed?
Doesn't matter. You're such a novice. Clearly, this guy, Elliot, we've got to get him high at some point. I know it's going to hurt his political ambitions, but
yeah, good luck.
Hey,
he ran Southcom. I think he's fine.
Well, if we want to get our economy straight, we should legalize every crop that doesn't hurt anybody, because the Chinese are going to grow it. Gentlemen, congratulations on the book. It's very, very good. I hope everybody gets it. Elliot, I love you and have great admiration for you. It's great to see you, and I look forward to catching up. And Admiral, it's so great to catch up with you two. I was so looking forward to sitting down and talking with you guys. And congratulations. This is the best interview you guys have done.
You know what? I think it is. Good job. I'm going to call Martha Raddatz right now and tell her that.
I already texted her. It's fine. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Great seeing you, Pete.
You too, bud. How about that? Wasn't that a great interview? Didn't I do a great job? I was pretty proud of myself for that one. I'm not going to lie. I had watched several other interviews that they'd done, been reading the book, and was very prepared and had a lot of fun with both those guys. And I hope you appreciated it and enjoyed it, rather. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for subscribing to the podcast. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night, or tonight. What day is it? No, tomorrow night at our stand-up happy hour hangout. Lots to talk about there. And that's all I've got for you today. I mean, technically it was 2 guests, but I usually do at least 2 separate segments here. And tomorrow I'm expecting to have Ali Velshi join me and Dr. Christina Greer, who are both favorites of mine here on the show. Looking forward to talking with them. But until then, you're not alone. I love you. Reach out and connect on the Discord platform. If you're a subscriber, if you're not, sign up right now. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take it away, John Carroll.
Saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for loss, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up.
And now that time that Pamela Anderson introduced me on a stand-up comedy show.
Let's start the show. You can hear our first comic every day as the host of Stand Up with Pete Dominic on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Please welcome Pete Dominic.
Keep it going, everybody. How about that? Holy shit. Thank you very much. Pamela Anderson is a sentence I never thought I would say out loud and have you hear it. I just never thought you would hear me say it. So, I love you. It's weird. She's much more than, though, just a sex symbol. An amazing activist. Seriously, an amazing activist and a business person. And it's really, I'm a huge feminist. I have 2 daughters, and I want my daughters to grow up to be just almost exactly like you. Like, mostly, minus a couple of things, just like you.
Well, that was weird. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Goodbye.